Thank you.
Right, Mr. Tully, let's come on to the incident on the 25th of April of 2017, which we refer to as the choke hold incident. You have given two narrative accounts of the incident, one to the police in your Sussex Police statement of the 23rd of November, and another version, albeit you anonymised the people involved in your statement to the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council. If I ask you to give a narrative now, would you prefer to have one of those documents in front of you to refresh your memory, or does your memory need any refreshing? And can you give us an account of what happened before we play the footage, what the circumstances were? What do you feel more comfortable with?
I'm happy to just go ahead.
All right. Well, let's begin then. It's the 25th of April, and you'll remember a little earlier we looked at that ongoing record of constant observations on D1527 on the 25th of April, and the entry began at 1 minute past 7, but the actual substantive entry, which I read out, do you remember? We can look at it again if you want, was at 1940, 20 minutes to 8. Is that the time, more or less? I don't expect a precise time, but is that, as you remember it now, the sort of time, evening time, when the incident, which was effectively in 3 parts, took place?
Yes, so it was around that time.
Right. Now, as for you, what duty were you on that evening before these incidents began?
I think that day I was assigned to be an activities officer, but because of short staffing, I was in the evening assigned to work on Ewing.
Yeah.
And my responsibility on Eden Wing for the first sort of hour was to observe a detainee under constant supervision in cell 8.
Right. And was on the wing at the time there another officer by the name of Neha?
Yes, sir.
Which you spell in your statement N-E-E-H-A.
Yes, sir.
But I've seen different spellings, but perhaps that's how you would spell it. And what was she doing?
She was working on the wing as well, covering short staffing.
Yeah.
But she was not a busy officer. She was sort of just keeping an eye on the wing.
Yeah. Was there another officer by the name of Clayton Fraser present?
Yes, sir.
And what was he doing at the time?
He was on constant supervision in cell 7, which was the cell in which D1527 was
Right.
being observed.
So we've got you're making observations on cell, did you say 8?
Yes, sir, which is directly opposite cell 7.
Yeah. Clayton Fraser on room 7, cell 7, where 1527 is.
Yes, sir.
And Neha was on the wing.
At the bottom of the wing, yes, sir.
And the other two are all DCO, both DCOs?
Yes, sir.
And what was the first that made you aware that something was going on in 1527's cell?
I could hear banging
Right.
from either on the cell door or perhaps it was on the wall, sir.
So if it was the cell door, it suggests his cell door was closed.
Yes, sir.
Right. And as a result of that banging, what did you do?
Well, I had my back to the wall, so the two cells are at the end of the wing. So the very last two, the constant supervision cell 7 and constant supervision cell 8 are at the end of E-wing. So at the end of E-wing is a large wall, and then a gate and a locked door which leads to the control and separation unit.
Yeah.
So there's the wall, and then there's the cell doors, like so. So I was sat with my back to the wall, which led to the care and separation unit. To my left was cell 8. To my right was cell 7.
Yeah.
So I was facing down the wing. I was observing the detainee in cell 8, but I heard banging coming from cell 7.
So forgive me, if we understand the way you've positioned yourself, you're making observations on the cell to your left,
Yes, sir.
and the banging is coming from your right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I remained in contact with the detainee in cell 8. Sorry, since I was responsible for observing him, and this was, paramount importance because such was his risk of self-harm and suicide. But I also was able to position myself momentarily at times to kind of try and get a glimpse of what was happening in cell 7, but it wasn't really possible to see what was happening because I had to remain close to cell 8 so I could continue observing the suicidal detainee in that cell.
Right. So
I hear banging, but I'm not exactly sure what's going on or why.
Yeah.
Shortly afterwards, the detainee that I'm observing is not behind a locked door, so he's free to leave his cell, the detainee in cell 8. So he leaves the wing and goes down to the bottom of the wing, near to where Nihar is working. I follow him because I need to observe him. I hear more banging and commotion coming from cell 7, and I'm interested and I want to know what's happening there. So I asked Nihar if she would mind taking over responsibility of observing the cell at the detainee that had come from cell 8 with me, and she agreed, and she took over constant supervision of the detainee from cell 8. I was then free to go up to cell 7 to see what was going on. When I entered the cell...
so the door's open now?
The door is open at this point. Clayton Fraser is now in the cell, and so is DCM Steve Loughton.
Right, pause there. Clayton Fraser was engaged in constant supervision.
Yes, sir.
Of cell 7 at that point. Where had Steve Loughton come from?
I don't know if he was working on the wing already, if he was perhaps in the wing office. As I say, my attention for most of the time that preceded this, this happening was on the detainee in cell 8.
Right. So there are two officers, one a DCM, one a DCO.
Yes, sir.
Which is the site that greets you as you attend the cell. Where was 1527?
He was lying with his head by the toilet basin. So, as I described yesterday, there's a wall that conceals the toilet, but there's a wide enough gap for a large person to walk through.
Right.
The detainee D1527 was lying with his head by the toilet basin, and his body coming out from the toilet area.
So how much of him was because of course we're going to see some of this on the footage, but some of it's hard to understand because of the nature of the filming. But how much of him was inside the toilet area and how much was outside? Was he up to his waist, as it were, or was it more or less?
Around the waist, I'd say.
So his legs are sticking out into the room and his head's somewhere near the toilet bowl?
Yes, sir. That sounds about right.
Right. And what happens then?
DCM Loughton can see that the detainee is trying to strangle himself.
How?
With, I think, a bedsheet or his or a piece of clothing.
Was it tied to anything, do you know?
No, sir. It wasn't tied to anything.
So how was he trying to strangle himself with some ligature which wasn't attached?
Tying it around and pulling as hard as he could.
Right.
Steve Loughton asked for someone to give him a fish knife. I think Clayton Fraser handed him a fish knife. And Steve Loughton managed to cut the ligature from around his neck, and he kind of pulled him out of the toilet area and sat him on the bed. Yeah.
At that point, I'm looking at your statement, you recalled that Loughton shouted something like, "Get staff," and did you do something about that?
Yes, so I left the cell and I shouted to Nihar to get staff, because that wouldn't have involved her leaving the constant supervision. She merely would have had to use her radio.
Yeah. And did more staff arrive?
Yes, sir.
In the meantime, was Steve Loughton successful in getting the ligature from his neck?
He was, sir.
What happened to 1527 then?
He was sat on the bed. He got up. He went into a kind of rage, clearly distressed and upset, saying that he would die later, soon, now, I will die. I don't care if I die, I will die here tonight, later, soon, now, I will die. He said he was shouting, I asked nicely for a TV. I asked nicely, nothing, no, these sorts of things.
What was he complaining about? What did he want?
It was hard to know exactly because his English wasn't great, or at least whilst he was so angry, he was struggling to communicate.
I mean, we saw on the 24th of April, he certainly had wanted to go back onto Sea Wing.
Sir.
Was that an issue, do you know, or...?
Not that I'm aware of at the time, so possible, but it wasn't clear.
Did any healthcare nurse turn up around this point?
Around this point, yes.
Who?
I think it was Joe Buss, sir.
Yeah. So that's the first part of this trilogy of incidents, because then there's a second part to it when he seems to swallow a mobile phone battery.
Well, the sort of rage that he seemed to go into, he did sit back down on the bed. He put a phone battery into his mouth.
Did you see him do that?
Yes, sir.
And so you actually saw the battery go into his mouth?
They were quite bulky batteries.
Yeah. And where did he get the mobile phone?
He would have had a mobile phone.
So that was his mobile phone?
Yes, sir. And so he was sat on the bed. I managed to get myself into a position where I was sat on the bed opposite him. So I had a good vision of him, and the cameras did too. He's trying to swallow the battery. At one point, he makes quite a serious attempt to swallow it, and he spits in my face as a consequence of choking on the battery.
Yeah.
Not deliberate in terms of spitting in my face. By this point, DCM Nathan Ring's arrived. Nurse Joe Buss is certainly there. DCM Steve Loughton's left to go and fill out a use of force report because he had to use force on the detainee to stop him from self-strangulating in the first place.
Yeah.
DCM Nathan Ring starts saying that he'll soon be bouncing around like a Duracell bunny. People were referring to him as a prick or a twat.
Anybody tried to persuade him to hand the battery over, or?
Yes, sir. Steve Loughton did.
And did he give the battery up, or do you know if it remained in his mouth?
No, sir. He didn't give the battery up.
Because there's talk, I think we'll find, suggesting that either the battery wasn't in his mouth at all, or it was found later by a drain near the toilet. Do you know about that?
The battery was certainly in his mouth, sir.
But he must have released it at some point.
Yes, sir. Oh, definitely.
All right. So the battery part of the incident, how long did that last for? Roughly?
5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes.
And what's the next thing? Did things go quiet at that point?
Things went a bit quiet, and Clayton Fraser was left to continue observing him.
And where does everybody else go?
I returned to Nihar and check that she's okay.
So you resume your duties on cell 8?
Well,
or wherever that detained man was.
I intended to. I went to the bottom of the wing where the detainee was, and he was being observed by Nihar.
Right.
I asked Nihar if she wanted me to take over constant supervision of the detainee again, since I'd seen what happened up there, and things seemed to be calming down. Then it kind of appeared that things were still happening in the cell, because Nathan Ring and the nurse Joe Buss were still lurking around up there, and Nihar said she didn't mind continuing observing the detainee from cell 8. So I asked her if she was sure, and she said she was, so I didn't take over constant supervision of the detainee in cell 8. And I returned to the to room 7, and I was accompanied by Jan Pascali.
Yeah. And where did he come from?
Well, he was an evening officer, so he was meant to be on the wing.
Yeah. Give me a second. Sorry, I just missed that because I diverted myself. I had to ask one of my colleagues something. Can you just repeat, where did Pascali come from?
It felt like he came from the wing office, or perhaps he may have just entered. He may have just come onto the wing from the wing.
And
entrance.
what was it that was going on in the cell to attract his attention? What was happening at this point?
Well, when I went back into the cell, upon returning to it, the detainee was back in the same position that I'd previously found him in, with his head by the toilet basin. At first, he wasn't trying to harm himself, but he was down there in the same position.
Yeah. And what was he doing this time?
Well, at first he was doing nothing, and I kind of lingered around outside the cell with the others. At first, I asked the nurse Jo Buss what the deal was with him, or what his problem was, and she said that the detainee is an arse. I asked the same question to Pascali, who said he's acting like a 3-year-old. I shortly went into the cell, and I was in there with Clayton Fraser, the nurse Jo Buss, DCM Ring. DCM Ring made some more disparaging comments towards the detainee before he asked me if I would be willing to continue observing the detainee under constant supervision. Clayton Fraser was also in there with me. My understanding is that he remained the sole person responsible for constantly observing him, but Ring wanted me to remain there as well. So there I was, stood at the entrance to the toilet area with Clayton Fraser just behind me, looking at this detainee lying face down with his head by the toilet basin. Soon he starts to choke himself with his hands. Clearly intent on doing as much damage to himself as he possibly could. He was choking. You could hear him gasping for breath, and indeed you can hear that in the undercover footage. I felt it was imperative for me to try and use force on D1527 to stop him from strangling himself, so I did.
What type of force was it?
I put my hands onto his arms and tried to pull his arms away from his hands to stop him from strangling himself.
You mean his arms away from his neck?
His arms away from his neck,
Yeah.
yes, sorry, sir.
Oh.
Yes, I shouted for help. I said I was begging D1527 to stop. I said, please stop, don't do it, mate. Stop, please. I also pleaded with him before using force, but when it was clear that he was not listening to my request for him to stop harming, it then became necessary for me to use force on him.
Yeah.
So I placed my hands onto his arms and pulled his arms away from his neck. Called for help. Charlie Francis then arrived.
Had Charlie Francis been in there before?
No, he responded to my call for
Yeah.
help.
And he's a what? DCO?
I mean, I think he may have been in and around the incident
Yeah.
at times, but
Okay.
at that specific moment he wasn't in the room.
And he's a DCO, is he?
Yes, sir.
Right.
So I took control of the detainee's left arm. Charlie Francis took control of his right arm, and Clayton Fraser took control of his legs. The three of us managed to successfully prevent a detainee from harming himself. He was clearly intent on doing that, especially...
Yeah. Was he pulled out of the
Yes,
toilet area?
we pulled him out of the toilet area into the middle of the cell with his... and he was laying on his back.
Yeah.
So I kind of had his control of his left arm, and I was just holding it in a sort of... just holding it sort of to the ground. Charlie was doing the same with the right arm.
Yeah.
Clayton was in control of the legs. He wasn't. I mean, it all happened pretty quickly. He wasn't, resisting us strongly. But Jan soon joined the restraint. I mean, given that he wasn't resisting very strongly, we were able to kind of moderate the fall. At first we had to, you had to pull his arms away from his neck to stop him from strangling. But once you kind of had him on his back, you didn't really need to apply any great force to stop him. We just held him in position so that he was not choking himself. So we didn't really need to apply much force at that point at all, and indeed we didn't. But Pasquale soon joined the restraint, and he knelt down with his legs either side of D1527's head. He placed his fingers around his neck and his thumbs on his Adam's apple. This clearly caused distress to D1527, and he began to resist.
Yeah. Tell us, as you have that in mind, and as that hold that Jan Pasquale had of his neck, just focusing on 1527's face, which I'm hoping we're going to see in an unpixelated version of the footage we saw before, if that's going to be ready to play. What signs of distress were there on his face from what was going on, from the hold that Jan Pasquale had round his neck? How were his eyes? What was the colour of his face? What was he doing?
Well, initially, after Jan choked the detainee.
Well, it was during, while that was going on. How were his eyes? How was he looking?
You're talking about before the choke?
No, during it.
Oh, right, yes. Yes, Jan had his thumbs on his Adam's apple, and he applied an incredible amount of force onto his airways, and D1527 fell silent. His face appeared to kind of redden. His eyes were bulging. At least that's how I remember things. And Jan said to him, "Don't you fucking move, you fucking piece of shit. I'm going to put you to fucking sleep." This lasted, I'd say, at least 6 seconds.
What, the pressure?
The pressure, yeah, the pressure. His hands were around his throat, and his thumb were on his throat for quite a long time. And it was when the detainee started to resist that the pressure was applied.
How did he resist? Verbally or physically?
He couldn't resist verbally, sir, because he was being strangled.
Right.
He couldn't speak.
Yeah.
He physically was trying to move around.
Right. Obviously, we're going to see this, and we see you at that point saying, "Jan, easy, easy."
Yeah, so it was at that point that I worried that the detainee was at imminent risk of serious harm.
Well, what did you think Jan was going to do?
I thought Jan would kill him, sir, and he seemed intent on killing him. My inference from him saying he was going to put him to sleep was a threat to kill him. Was a threat to kill him. Sorry.
So
and I had to, despite the risk that this posed to my cover, say, Jan, easy, easy.
And did he release the pressure when you said those words?
As soon as I intervened, he stopped.
Yeah. And we know, and I'm going to take this quickly now because we can, and we'll look at the footage. I'm simply picking this up from what you said in your police statement, that Jan released the pressure from his neck. Joe Buss was stood just behind inside the door.
Yes, sir.
And not being unkind to her, you say in your police statement it's possible she might not have seen the choke because of the way that Jan had positioned himself, and it's sometimes difficult to orientate yourself with the footage, but did he have his back towards the door?
Yes, sir, he did.
Yeah.
And he was leant over the detainee with his arms spread wide, so...
Yeah. But you say, as Jan eased off, D1527 started to make sounds. It sounded as though he was choking on the froth coming from his mouth.
Mm.
Started to talk, but his voice sounded odd. He was struggling to communicate, trying to get his breath back, chest heaving as he was gasping for breath, while at the same time trying to complain about his neck.
Yes, sir.
And that's when you say, I genuinely had thought Jan was going to kill him. And then he's rolled into the recovery position, and then we'll see certain other interventions. He's called a tool, an idiot, we're bored with this, are you a man or a mouse, all of that kind of thing.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. At the end of it all, we see a conversation that you have about whether any use of force report should be completed. One conversation was with Jan.
Yes, sir.
And what did he tell you, and what did you understand by it?
Jan approached me and said that wasn't a use of force. He said, listen, that wasn't a use of force. And then he said to me that as it stood, there would be no use of force report.
Yeah.
That was a clear instruction that we should cover up what had happened.
Yeah. And Joe Buss effectively repeated the same.
Joe Buss,
Right towards the end, that Jan had said no use of force report, so she was going to write up the minimum.
she conspired in the cover-up, yes, sir.
Right. And ought there to have been a separate use of force report for this incident? We know because you've told us, and there is one, and we'll look at it, that Steve Loughton went off to make a use of force report for the first of these three incidents. The second incident, the battery in the mouth, did that warrant, in your judgment, a separate use of force report, or was that not a use of force around the battery incident itself?
So Steve Loughton acted properly with regard to filling out a use of force report. That was one instance of use of force. He filled out a use of force report as was expected. The detainee, when the detainee placed the battery into his mouth, no force was used, so there was no need for a use of force report.
Exactly.
Of course, later on, when we restrained D1527, a use of force should have been submitted.
So that should have been a separate...
That was a separate use of force. That was a separate use of force, so yes, and as such, a separate use of force report should have been submitted. I don't know how he got, or if he got. I'd be interested to know if Clayton Fraser or Charlie Francis filled out a use of force report. I don't think a use of force report was ever filled out.
We only have the one, and we will look at it a little later, but I just want to go back to something we looked at earlier. And can we put up, please, on the screen again, CJS 001085 at page 17, please. Page 17. And if we can highlight the top half, please. Expand the top half. And do you remember we looked at this a little earlier? 25th of April, 1901, 1527, kicking and banging door. Well, that must be perhaps the second part of the incident that you heard.
Yes, sir.
And then at 1940, in different handwriting, seen in room 7, constant watch, 1527, had tied a T-shirt around his neck, angry, upset. So that's the first part, is it?
Yes, sir.
Had mobile phone battery in his mouth, attempted to self-strangulate in toilet. So you've got the three parts of the incident there. visual observations only due to demeanour, RESP 16, whatever that means. Responder, perhaps? Don't know.
Perhaps, sir, perhaps.
Okay. Do you regard that, from the experience you have of completing forms like this, as being complete insofar as what had happened during the course of that evening?
No, sir.
Should it have been fuller?
Yes, sir.
For example, it doesn't mention any use of force.
Precisely, sir.
And so we have only one use of force form, and that relates to the first part of this incident. There is none for the latter part, the third of these three separate incidents around the same time. And as I say, we'll come to look at it a little later. Let's play then, please, the relevant footage. I'll come back to aspects of what is said, and I will come back to ask you about certain other things which follow on from the events on the 25th of April, once we've gone through all of that. Right, can we put up, please, on screen, Kenkov 1007, and its clip V 2017-0425 00020, beginning at 8:47. We saw this during the course of the opening statement. Can I make clear? I'm finished. Can I make clear? In terms of other footage, I'm not going to play everything or everything of everything, because we've seen a lot of it already,
Yes.
and in order to save some time. But this I am going to play.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can we play it?
Get staff. Lads, get staff. We need someone. Get someone from the office. Neha.
This not. Get up in.
You all right, Steve? Bobby, do you need a hand, mate? Do you need a hand? You all right?
Put it on his neck. It's all right, put it off his neck. Sit him up.
Go on, up on the bed. Up on the bed. Up you get. Up you get. On the bed. On the bed. Come on. That's it. Sit on the bed.
Let's get off there, then shake him up. What's in your mouth? Sit his mouth.
What's in your mouth? What's in your mouth? What's in your mouth?
Get healthy then to EB room 7 immediately, please. How did he get in there? We need to see him. Take it away.
That's it.
No, it's all right. I'm trying to do that. Sit down, mate. Sit down.
I'm in now. I'm in. I will die here. You force me to go in. I go nicely. I'm in. I asked nicely for David. I asked nicely for everything. He said no. I'm asking no. I come nicely. I will die here today. Don't care. You can put me in. You put me lock me up. Doesn't matter. I will die here. Don't worry. You finish up. I will die again. Till it's finished. I come nicely. Respect. He looked up inside. Asked everything nicely. Said no. Why are you talking to me racistly like this? You're talking nicely. I love to do this. No, I love to do this. I'm inside. I will go. You get me in. I will die. I will die now. Later soon I will die. I don't give a damn. I will die. You leave me here. I will die. Like, stay here. Like, you don't know. No.
Still here. Just try the same reason then. It's got a battery. Give me a battery. Don't put it in your mouth. It's got a battery in his mouth.
It's got a battery in it. Yeah, there's a phone battery.
It's a phone battery.
It's a bit big for a normal battery.
So no one called the first response, did they?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, someone called it.
Yeah.
I didn't press my button.
Who called it? It wasn't me.
I just asked for help here.
It wasn't me.
I guess
He said 30 people come through.
That's fine.
You're standing down the response.
It wasn't even a fucking response. Trying to swallow a battery. Trying to swallow a phone battery. It's 40, isn't it? It's 40, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's come out of the TV?
What is wrong, mate? I thought we'd make a bit of progress yesterday.
Take that in your mouth and talk to your nurse.
Don't swallow it.
What do you do? Just sit there all every night? Take your battery out of your mouth. Ain't going to get you out this wing, is it? The longer you do stuff like this, the longer you're going to stay there. Take him out. Let the nurse look at your neck. You didn't look back. You jumped onto it and I just cut it off. Told me, just not got very tired for it. He's running around all day, he is. Let's talk to you.
What's all this about? What's happening, Lloyd?
Could be a late one tonight.
Hey,
Could be a late one tonight.
what's that?
With the issue of full step in the paper, it'll be in there.
Who has?
I have. What's that? Get that tunes around there. Was it?
Going all right, mate? Going all right. Do yourself on it, mate. You're going all right now, mate. It's all the batteries. You're full of it. Bernie's telling us.
Hey? What, do you want me to leave?
No, I don't know what's happening.
I don't know, I thought the nurse wanted to speak to you. I didn't really want to leave the nurse in the room. Alright.
He might be a child. He might be he gets a bit nervous. Which isn't going to happen. He can sit there and sulk. You see my break? Do me now.
What's the deal? No, what's the deal? What's the deal? Sorry.
We need to keep an eye on him. When he goes in there, we need to go and keep an eye on him. What's he doing now? Sulking.
You don't need to do nothing. No, you have to. Please, go. Please. No, I don't need to look. Please, mate, I'll look. I will look. He will tell him. He doesn't care. He thinks he put me here, lock me up. I didn't care. I will die. Don't worry about this one. Please, please, hold up. Please,
Sorry?
please, mate.
No, it's yeah.
No one has to care because it's. Please. No. Please. You see, you love me. No problem. No, you stop me this time. Next time.
Slim, manager, some fella might help my way.
Didn't I say?
Sorry, thank you.
What's up? Callum. Say again? No, we keep them in the library.
But you have it, you
Yeah, we have bail applications in the centre.
For example, tomorrow you can give one to the guy.
Yeah, man.
I'm just waiting for the right time.
What's the right time? Every single day, put them.
What's that? Clayton still is. I was just on that constant thinking about that. I saw them two going into the cell together, and I thought I'll go and see if he's alright. Do you know what I mean? Because I thought he was going to do something silly. So what? I think he tied something around his neck. He was trying to strangle himself. We didn't. Well, not be able to get hands on. He got into when I got into the cell. He was in the toilet. I don't know how he got around into the toilet and onto the floor. Do you know what I'm saying?
You're on the toilet.
On the floor behind the toilet. Well,
Actually go on the toilet.
yeah.
Was it broken?
No, not behind the actual toilet. Behind the wall. Do you know what I'm saying? How did he not get seen? Do you know what I mean? He's on a constant watch.
Can't see.
Eh?
Can't see.
Can you not?
There's a wall pool.
Oh yeah, yes, isn't it? Do you want it?
Straight like that. Listen to him talking. He ain't got back. Well, I said to him, this one. Before we had one that put the black sheet around his mouth, tended it, chewed it up. When I checked, it was all in the drain. He ripped it up, put it around his face, and chucked it down the drain to look like he took the toilet.
No idea, mate. How old is this guy?
Smell like it's fucking good. Fucking newsflash. It won't stop.
What do you recommend he does, Jan?
Just gonna start sharpening the screw. That's it. Practice your body.
Yeah, I can.
Bullshit.
I can take that back off you if you want me to. It's up to you. Just shout me, alright?
Yeah, easily. No, by your face. I was working 2 years with the national camp to deliver something. Easily hit. But then he gets nice, no worries.
It's up to you if you want me to take that back
I
off
don't mind,
you.
I don't mind. It's really up to you. You decide. You tell me, Paddy. Just be honest with me. Do you
For the
want
next 15 minutes I'll stay off it, just while he's not calm.
to do it or not? Get someone. How long have you?
For now, no. Just because I'm worried about the officers in that cell. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't mind doing it.
But, sorry.
Paddy, relax.
I'll give you, oh, you don't like chocolate raisins? Where are you going? No.
315, Matthew. I'm coming. 315.
What are you doing?
Honestly, to grab bags, bro.
Him, champion. Him.
Wait. Sorry, mate.
Can you just
Hello.
pause it?
Right.
Can we keep the image on the screen? Are you able just to scroll back just a little, please? A bit more. No, more. Right, pause there for a moment. Mr. Tully, while we've got this on, and because it's the first opportunity with you, rather than going into the detail for the moment, the door that we see on the left with the glass in it, is that the viewing panel to one of these cells?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And we can see in the ceiling there are sort of mirrored type objects. Is that so that you have a complete 360 of the room if you're observing from outside?
Yes, sir.
And I wonder if we can just scroll back a little more. A bit more, one more. Stop. Stop. Right, pause there. Now, let's be clear. Cell 7, do you see where that screen is?
On the left, sir, yes.
On the left. Cell 7 would be on the left.
Yes, sir.
It's just out of picture. In relation to that, so that we're absolutely clear, where is cell 8? Is it behind us?
No, sir. It's on the right. You can see this. You can see the door is open.
So that's cell 8 on the right that
Yes,
you were
sir.
telling. So that's where you were keeping constant observations.
Yes, sir.
That gate at the back behind the nurse, what is that?
Once you open that gate and the locked door immediately behind it, you're in the block.
The CSU.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we can see the green paint, which may or may not be colour coding for E-wing. Let's see if we can turn around, because at this point you walk up and down the wing and there may be some other things that we can pick out here. Can we just scroll back as slowly as you can? So we've got a better view now towards the back end, the CSU end of the wing. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then that's it. Now, the reason I asked you about cell 7 and 8 is because we seem to have another door here with a big viewing pane. What's that we have in image under the screen, the TV screen?
It's a cell. I think it looks like it might be cell 2. It's not of the same size as the viewing pane, but it is slightly different to the normal cells on the other wings. It's like somewhere, but it's not as big as the big windows, but it's not as small as the small viewing panels.
Right. But that's definitely not cell 8.
It's definitely not cell 8.
Right. People. There was a nurse in nurse's uniform who turned up after Joe Buss and goes in the room to speak to 1527. Who was she?
I don't know her name, sir.
No, but she was from healthcare.
Yes, sir.
And we see at one point, outside the cell, a taller lady, apparently also in uniform, wearing glasses. Who was she?
She was also a nurse, sir.
Her name?
I don't know, sir. You're referring to the blonde girl?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
There was also a woman who you speak to towards the end of the clip, and you're having conversation. Is that Neha?
Yes, sir.
And we also see the servery, don't we?
We do, sir.
I wonder if we can just scroll back and maybe pick that up. That's Neha.
That's
There-
the servery.
There.
Here.
So we've got the shutters, and all of the wings have those. So that's the servery where the detained men would queue up for their food.
Yes, sir.
Was it the same size as on other wings, this one, or were some of them bigger than others, the
This is
serving area?
This is slightly smaller than the ones on the other wings.
Yeah. All right, but I'm not sure there's anything else that I particularly want to pick out from the imagery. What I do want to ask you before we move on to the next piece of footage is this, and I can do it from a transcript that we have. Chair for you at B11. And if we can put up on screen TRN 0000001. And I just want to pick up some of the words. We saw them subtitled. TRN 0000001. Thank you. And that's the relevant transcript for what we've just been looking at. And you see right at the top of the page, on page 1, this is the point where you say get staff. You see right at the top.
Yes, sir.
And then it goes on, get staff in here, because we're looking down the columns on these transcripts, this particular style. Thank you. So it's get staff in here. We need someone, get someone from the office, Neha. Steve Loughton, fish knife, give us, and so he's clearly asking for the fish knife at that point. And on the right column, at the top, I've got it off his head. It's all right, I've got it off his head. So that's clearly a reference to Steve Loughton having got the ligature off his neck. And then further down at the bottom, I mean, we've seen this and we've heard it, but I'm just picking out a few aspects of it. What's in your mouth? Sit down is right at the bottom of that page. And at the top of the next, Charlie Francis, what's in your mouth? And he repeats that. At the bottom, how did he get in there? We didn't see him. Whether that's correct translation rather than how did it get in his mouth, but it almost seems certain it's a reference to the battery at that point.
Yes, sir.
And then we have D1527 at the foot of the right-hand column on page 2, saying, as you've already told us, I will die, and he carries on saying that on page 3, I will die now. And on the right-hand column of page 3, Steve Loughton is talking, saying in the top right of the right-hand column, just tied something around his neck. He's got a battery. Give me the battery. Don't put it in your mouth. He's got a battery in his mouth. He's got a battery in his mouth. On page 5, in the left-hand column, at line 12, Steve Loughton, take that out of your mouth, talk to the nurse. You say don't swallow it. Loughton, now what do we do? Just sit here all flipping night. Take the battery out of your mouth. It isn't going to get you out of this wing, is it? This is how it reads at line 42, when all we do is stuff like this, the longer you're going to stay in here. And line 49, right-hand column, take it out of your mouth. And then on page 6, please, Joe Buss says at the top, what's it all about? What's this all this about? What's happening? Line 11, could be a late one. And then at 33, could be a late one and all. He says at line 22, could be a late one and all. And then at 33, the use of force flipping paperwork. So you said he went off to do the right thing, but that's his reference to it. And then at the top of the next column, at line 49, a battery in his mouth, the cock. Nathan Ring then intervenes, has he? Somebody says he swallowed it. Ring, going all night, isn't he? At line 65. 75, going all night. Duracell Bunny, isn't he? 81, going all night now, isn't he? 86 and 87, Nathan Ring, swallowing batteries, you're full of it. 92, burn his tongue. And then at the foot of page 7 at line 47, a child, which isn't going to happen, is what he appears to say. Towards the foot of the right-hand column on page 7 at line 90, he's just a dick. On page 9, at line 27, bell end might be off my wing. So whoever Staffer 3 was, he's referring presumably to 1527 being a bell end, might be off my wing. Was that a reference to E-wing or another wing? Do you know?
I think maybe he was thinking that they'd move him somewhere else, and so he'd be rid of him. I imagine that member of staff was working on E-wing.
And then on page 11, please, in the right-hand column at line 66, Nathan Ring says he ain't got a battery in his mouth, had he? I said to you, it's all good. He put the battery round his mouth and pretended to chew it. And when I checked it, it was all in the drain. He picked it up, put it round his face, and at line 91, chucked it all down the drain to look like he'd something the toilet. And that's why I asked you a little earlier. You said you had no doubt that he'd actually put it in his mouth.
Yes, sir.
Nathan Ring seems to be suggesting it was all a bit of a pretense.
Nathan Ring wasn't there at the start of the incident, sir.
And then on the next page, 12, Jan Pascali talks about the battery at line 25. Fucking newsflash, he won't stop. And then Jan Pascali, he's going to start shouting and screaming. We saw that on the footage. And that's all I'm going to ask about that transcript from that footage. Chair, the next clip is about 27 minutes long. So, again, slightly early, but now as good a time as any to take our break.
Agreed, thank you. So we'll return at 3:15. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can we now play Kenkov 1007 V217 0425 00021 right from the beginning? Thank you.
What's going on, Precious? Wait, hang on, mate.
I sound like a bitch because you were told about
No, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. It should be Kenkov 1007, not 1012. This is the 4th of May. We need the 25th of April. So it's Kenkov 1007 V 2017 0425 00021. And can I say, before we do play it, while the evidence handler is finding it, Chair, obviously this is arguably the most distressing footage that we will be playing, and therefore if anybody is uncomfortable with that or is likely to be distressed, it's just my cautionary note to them that if they don't want to watch it, then they are free to leave. If they do, then they should understand that it will be distressing footage.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Altman.
Can I also say that I had hoped when I made my opening statement last week that the footage regarding 1527 would by now be unpixelated. I'm afraid it isn't, so at some future time, I don't know when, we will have to play perhaps at least part of it in open session, but now is not that time. It's not ready. I don't know why.
Okay, thank you.
You right? What's the event? Yeah.
We can see the time, can't we, Mr. Tully, on the clock there? It's about 7:30.
Oh, sorry, mate.
So you well, a form cannot yet be done, isn't it?
Just trying to smash the light.
Yeah. Can he actually do it? No.
It's been done in the past, but it takes a lot.
Janina, I'll hang on till 8, because I'm going at 8.
Okay.
And I'll take it back in the morning.
Let Oscar know that you can't do the form yet.
Oh yeah, I do the earlier form, I just do it on visual arts. So I do it on visual.
You'll do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what's actually? Do you know what is actually his problem is?
It's an arse, basically. You can't get what you want. That's the first thing now. You can't get what you want, and I can't get what I want, so hang on, so we'll find out what to put myself.
What do you think the best way to deal with this?
Hang on, is he taking that out? Oh, I just wonder.
Has he done it? Yeah, maybe one more, officer.
You stand just about here.
Do you want to go in?
No, you stand just about
Outside,
there.
sorry, my shirt.
Yeah, just about there because you get the reflection.
Alright, sure.
That's right.
Just wait, just think this might have to go in, do you know what I mean?
Right. Just wait. I think it's still in time.
Just still banging it? Alright, just let him bang it.
He's got water in
He's just broken it, that's all. So if he uses it on himself, he'll be able to go in.
into the light.
He's got water in it.
crying tonight.
He couldn't have shattered the cage.
No, he hasn't shattered it.
Not yet.
Bless him. Bless him, Joe. Bless him. Congratulations.
I have, but listen, what's the point of it?
Huh? Whatever. Is that back to me?
I've done my years. Down to your shoulder.
It's going I don't know what we're doing working on a place like this when we've got injuries, do you know what I mean?
Quite nice to correct all the ligaments and tendons, isn't it? Literally, I've mostly bucketed it.
Yeah, no, I was just being safe, mate. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She was probably alright, as you say. Right. Starting again. I'm not on this constantly, you know. I can do, do you know what I mean? If you want me to speak, play it.
Around his neck, I'll just check. He's just sucking a battery, he's sucking a battery. So he wants to use as his dummy? Fine, I'm happy with that. The Lord's here for a bit, Cameron?
Yeah, alright, watching.
Quite a good video, isn't it?
Ah.
I've got two good ones. The last couple of days I'm quite happy to use them both.
What are you doing? Stop it. Stop. Mate, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Give us a hand. Guys, please. Give us a hand. Stop. Get your hands off. Don't do that, mate. Don't do it, mate. Don't do it, mate. Don't do it, mate. Don't do it. Don't do it, mate. Don't do it. Don't do it, mate. Yeah. Stop. 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 The ring needs to be locked down. No, he didn't have it. Sorry? I don't think he had anything with him. We couldn't really see. I was tooled in. I don't know. Yeah. I couldn't see. I literally just went to look at him then and he was doing it. Nathan just asked me to come in and look. Relax, relax.
Relax. Relax.
Fucking piece of shit. I'm gonna put you to fucking sleep.
Jan, easy. Is this one of the battery?
No, it's there.
Where?
It's there.
It's over there.
Battery.
Right.
Right, you're going to stop being a tool now, yeah? You're going to stop being an idiot. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no? Right. Right, you're going to stop being a tool. Yes? Yes or no? Right, now listen. Right, we're going to release you, and then you're going to speak to healthcare. You understand? Do you understand? Yes or no? Yes or no? Ready? Ready to be on the side. He's being covering position. Ready? Come over to you.
Why is he out of his cell? Come out the cell, mate.
Sound like the cell.
Go back to what we're doing now. It's finished. All right, lads. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, good.
All good.
You want to
You okay? Yeah.
I was just tiring, mate, trying to get him out. I was just knackered, so I was saying.
Right, go outside, get something to share. Go on.
You good, yeah? Yes, what's going on? What's happening? You good, yeah? Fuck off, don't touch my fucking... Right. Sorry, mate.
You alright, Jackie? Yes, mate, good. Oh, coffee. Why don't see you?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, man, mate. You know what I'm fucking like with the CNR, you know what I'm saying?
No, that wasn't CNR, really. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm alright, mate. I'm alright, Derek.
It's early for night shift or just extremely early for morning shift?
No, I'm early, but I'm going on a bed watch today.
Oh, okay.
Hey?
Well,
Oh, did you not see what you did? I don't know.
Yeah, you have to...
That's what I'm saying, sorry, you know, 'cause I told you to ease off, but I don't want you thinking I'm just being a pussy, do you know what I mean? But, hey?
Oh, the record's gone. Yeah, down the bottom, mate. Well, he knows he's going, he's packing, he's good.
Yeah, mate.
yeah,
exactly.
you know, being a mother has a hair, does it? Where are you going?
I'm going out, fresh air. Give us a couple minutes.
Yeah, mate, no worries.
I'll go just for a minute. As it stands, no use of force, special force, as it stands.
No use of force support?
All five.
Okay.
Dylan, boss,
You alright, mate, yeah?
you keep it him.
Hey?
You keep it him.
You what?
You keep it. Please,
I don't know what you're on about, mate, to be honest.
please, keep it. Touch, please. You touch it here. Like that, you eat.
Right. Okay.
You touch him or no?
Yeah, mate, to be honest, I don't really want to talk about it, so just leave it, yeah? It's alright.
Hey, I probe a normal conflict.
I don't know what you're on about, I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't want to talk about it, yeah?
I probe a normal.
What are you
Probe
I
Anders.
don't understand you.
Probe. open with you gore, but can't.
What?
Eh?
Are they putting that down as a restraint?
I think as it stands, according to what Jan's just told me, they're just gonna leave it. I don't know though. You'll have to speak to Jan.
Where's he gone upstairs?
I think it's gone for a cigarette. It's going to be down to Dixie, really. I'm not sure.
Right. Basically, I can't write anymore anyway because my hand's not going to let me.
Sure.
T-shirt round his neck, angry and upset, made him phone battery in his mouth, attempted to self-strangulate toilet, which observations only due to demeanour. Yeah, that's all I can say, isn't it? He's still having a gut pockets.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I'll go and write War and Peace upstairs, I think.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tully, a few things arising out of that. Please, we see, we can put up on the screen the transcript that goes alongside that particular footage, which is TRN 0000002, and chair view behind B12.
Thank you.
And I'm only going to skate through some of the highlights, if you like, but on page 2 at the top at line 51, we saw subtitled and we heard her say it, Joe Buss, he's an arse basically. He can't get what he wants, and at line 66 he can't get what he wants, and I can't get, I think it should read, what he wants. And then on page 5, we have Nathan Ring in the right-hand column at line 75 saying if he's sucking a battery, he's sucking a battery. So he wants to use it as his dummy. Fine, I'm okay with that. And that's where, at the bottom, he says, do you want to watch him for a bit, Callum? And as you told us, that was what you did. At the top of page 6, yeah, all right, I'll watch him. And at line 23 is when clearly he starts self-strangulating and you intervene, telling him, among other things, to stop it, mate, don't do that, don't do that. At page 7 of the transcript, top right, Pascali, having told 1527 to relax. At the top, you fucking piece of shit, because I'm going to put you to fucking sleep. When you intervene and say, Jan, easy. Tell us this, Mr. Tully. How confident could anyone be at the point at which Jan Pascali was kneeling over him with his neck in his hands that 1527 didn't have the battery in his mouth? Do you understand my question? While Pascali's got his hands around the man's neck, he could still have a battery in his mouth and choke on it while he's being throttled, as you put it. How confident was anybody that the battery was out of his mouth or wasn't still there at that point?
I didn't think the battery was in his mouth at this point. So
what about Pascali? Could he possibly have known one way or the other, had it been made clear that the battery was not in his mouth anymore?
It hadn't been made clear, but it was clear.
How was it clear?
Well, because he was heaving. He was gasping for breath as he was strangling himself.
Yeah.
And we know, because of what Nathan said, that later on the battery appeared to be by the drain. So,
well, I'll tell you why I ask, because if we look at the sequence just on this right-hand column, we've got Pascali saying, you fucking piece of shit, and we know he says that when he's got his hands around 1527's neck.
Mm-hmm.
Then you intervene saying, yeah, and easy. And then you've got Charlie Francis at 67 saying, did he swallow the battery?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't clear to Charlie Francis that the battery was out of his mouth.
Well,
and then staffer 4, whoever that is, says, no, it's here. But my point is, therefore, could anybody be confident at the point at which Pascali is leaning over D1527 and with his hands around his neck that he no longer had the battery in his mouth?
Well, Sir, Charlie Francis, asking if he swallowed the battery is, I've always taken that to be some form of cover, because he's seen Pascali choke the detainee.
Right.
And if he was going to have to at some point justify and cover for Pascali's actions, because at that point we didn't know there wasn't going to be any sort of use of force report documented.
Yeah.
So perhaps that might be used at some point to attempt to justify the application of force to the detainee's neck, as if it were some attempt to get the battery out of his mouth.
No, but you understand my point. That aside, whether you're right or wrong about whether Charlie Francis was engaging in some quick-thinking cover-up of what Pascali was doing, whether people were confident that at the time he's being throttled, because it's important, if he still had the battery in his mouth, he could certainly have died. And that's why I'm asking it. How confident could people be that he no longer had the battery in his mouth at that point until it was found later by a drain?
I can't speak for the other officers, so I can only say how confident I was.
You were confident he no longer had it in his mouth?
Yes, sir.
And why was that? Why were you confident it was no longer in his mouth?
Because I had seen him by the toilet basin, heaving, strangling himself. I mean, would you be choking yourself with the battery in your mouth whilst trying to swallow a battery? That I don't see how that would be an effective form of self-harm, sir.
Well, you're talking about a man who is rational and thinking through what's going on, but this was a very vulnerable, mentally ill man, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, and I'm not saying I was right. I just didn't think the battery was in his mouth. I may have been wrong.
All right. Page 8. Charlie Francis says you're going to stop being a tool now, stop being an idiot. And as we saw several times, it was he who was saying, we're getting bored with this, or it's becoming boring. But on page 9 at line 13, you say it would be nice if we had a manager in. And why did you say that?
Because I wanted another member of staff to be there, sir.
But of manager level?
Yes.
Because what difference would a manager have made?
It's just another witness to the incident.
At the end of it, we know you go off to the toilet. We see what happens there, where you become upset. You come out. Page 12, line 19, fuck off, don't touch my phone. You've explained all of that. And then on page 14, at line 18, Jan Pascali, as it stands, no use of force. You confirm that. No use of force report. And then on page 15, are they putting that down as restraint, says Joe Buss at line 59. And you say, I think as it stands, according to what Jan just told me, they're going to leave it. I don't know, though, you'll have to speak to Jan. And you say at the bottom, it's going to be down to Dixie, really. I'm not sure. Who were you talking about?
DCM Steve Dix, sir.
And what was going to be down to him?
Well, I wasn't... what I was trying to do here was it was a deployment of an undercover tactic in which I was putting the responsibility onto a manager rather than myself being responsible.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I was kind of being asked about wrongdoing, and I didn't want to encourage any form of wrongdoing, so I deflected the question.
And then on page 16, the final page of this transcript, Joe Buss at the top, line 6, I can't write any more anyway because Jan's not going to let me, she says. I can't even write. A T-shirt round his neck, angry and upset, he made. And then she continues, phone battery in his mouth. Attempted to self-strangulate on toilet. Observations only due to demeanour. She seemed to be reading from something when she was saying that to you. Had she already written something down?
Yes, I think so.
Right.
Sounds like it. And earlier when we were looking over the obs on the constant
This is
supervision.
what I'm going to ask you.
It sounds very familiar, sir.
Yeah, because it's pretty similar to what we read in that observation at 1940 on the 25th of April on that document.
Yes, sir.
And perhaps RESP, maybe it does refer to her, and maybe we can discover that from another source. So that's all I can say. She said he still hasn't been done properly. What does that mean, he still hasn't been done properly? Any idea? Does she mean the use of force report? I know it's not your words, it's hers, but you were involved in the conversation.
Yes, sir, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
You say, I don't know, and she says, I'll go and write the War and Peace upstairs. What War and Peace was she going to write, having already considered that there wasn't anything to write?
I'm not sure, sir.
All right. Moving on to another transcript, a very short one, TRN 0000003. And Chair, I wonder if we might just sit another quarter of an hour or so, because I'd quite like to finish this topic, and we can move on tomorrow.
Agreed.
TRN 0000003.
Mr. Tully, are you okay to continue for another 15
Chair,
minutes
thank
or
you.
so?
At the top, and this is just a little later, but it's on the same day, and you're speaking to Pascali at this point. Are we doing use of force? You say, Jan, that come from Dixie, so that's cool. And what were you saying there?
My understanding is that Jan was consulting. He was going to consult Steve Dix, DCM Dix, about whether or not we were going to have to or going to submit to use of force.
Yeah.
So my impression was that Pascali consulted him in some form.
So are you saying that Steve Dix sanctioned the absence of a use of force report? From what you understood?
From what I understood, so yes.
And then you have a bit of an exchange about biceps and Pascali telling you how much he weighs. Were you trying to explain to him why you found it so difficult?
He was telling me that he could tell that I was struggling after the incident, and that he was saying that I needed to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I was saying jokingly that I've still got biceps.
Right. And then you say on the right-hand side at line 61, you didn't see how long I was trying to get him out of the toilet. And he says, well, I didn't see that part of it. You say, you didn't, mate. Oh, fucking hell, I've never. And then he says, cracked him one in the ribs to soften him up. That's what you've got to do. So what was he advising you to do?
Punch him in the stomach.
In other words, what, to make it easier for yourself to restrain someone? Was that the effect of what he was saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's put up on screen, please, the use of force form. It's a B24 for you, Chair. CJS 005534, please. And we have to remind ourselves this form relates only to the first part of the incident. The sound has just dropped, has it?
Yeah, the amplification, I don't.
All right.
It's through microphones all of a sudden, so I don't know whether the YouTube or.
All right, let me repeat what I said. I'm putting up on screen.
I just don't know if it's coming through onto your system or if it's.
I see. Okay,
we pause for a
I'll
minute?
pause for a moment.
I can still hear you obviously, but I just don't know if there's a wider problem.
At least that's something. Well, I'm told they have sound on YouTube.
Okay.
Pauline?
do it without because
All right.
I didn't struggle through something like that times. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. This is the use of force, the relevant form for the first part of the incident, and it's the first time that we've looked at one of these. We can see at the top it calls itself a use of force DCF2, and beneath it says DC Rule 41, so it refers to Rule 41 of the detention centre rules. It's got the G4S logo on it. In this case, the date on which force was used, 25th of April. There's a log number. Time use of force commenced 1909 and completed a minute later at 1910. It relates, of course, to D1527. On the right-hand box, were ratchet handcuffs used? No. And beneath that, handheld camcorder body worn camera used? No in both instances. We can scroll down to the second half, please. Reason for force being used? Tick, prevent self-harm. Unplanned on the right. Did a member of healthcare attend to the detainee after the incident is ringed? Is the detainee on ACDT, and that is ringed, and somebody has written constant supervision? Room clearance and certification completed? No. And then we have the box below and the times that various people were informed of the use of force: the duty director, Home Office, Healthcare, IMB, and the care team. And in each case, it's Steve Loughton informing others of, presumably, the use of force and the reasons for it. Is that what your understanding is?
Yes, sir.
And then, please, over the page 2, we have a pro forma type of form. At the top is the time and the date, the name of the individual concerned, the detained man, male, unplanned. We go to the bottom half, please. Staff involved, and the only name there is DCM Steve Loughton, and he was Oscar 1. And it takes place. The location is own room. To the next page, please. Events leading up to the incident, and the circumstances why force was used. Only the right-hand side appears relevant: preventing injury to oneself, preventing self-harm. Type of force used in the centre: verbal reasoning used to de-escalate the situation initially and or during the incident? No. And then the bottom half of the document, please. Were C&R techniques used? A guiding hold. What's a guiding hold?
It's a sort of a very minimal level of force.
Was a guiding hold used during the first part of the incident, when he was trying to strangulate himself with a ligature?
He was trying to pull the arm away, and he was trying to prevent him from self-harming. But I mean,
would you call that a guiding hold?
Well, I wouldn't say it was any of these things on this list. So I mean,
so it was the next best thing, was it?
It was the next best thing. Yes. All
right. Were handcuffs applied? No. Was a baton drawn? No. Now, do you remember I asked you a little earlier whether, in circumstances of planned incidents where you're all kitted up, batons were used? There's a reference on this form to a baton. Had you ever seen batons used?
No, sir.
Had you ever seen batons carried by the Nationals when they would come in? Did they ever have those kind of objects?
I only saw the Nationals come in once. Didn't see a baton.
All right. So can you understand why there's reference in, albeit it's a pro forma, why there's reference to a baton and the drawing of a baton?
No, sir.
Right. Let's go to the next page, page 3. At the top, the use of force was authorised by, in this case Steve Loughton, DCM, and the reason to prevent self-harm as he was self-strangulating with a ligature. And he is relocated, apparently to an own room, and was passively resistant. On the next page, injury sustained and healthcare involvement. Was a member of healthcare present throughout the incident? No. And then we have part of the document apparently completed by Joe Buss. Senior nurse, did the detainee sustain any injuries at the time? Yes. Require outside hospitalisation? No. Did a member of staff require medical attention at the time? No. And then there are formal parts of this first form on page 5 with signatures, and I'm not going to go through those. And then there is an annex on page 7, use of force, which sets out the circumstances of it, whether a training course, the person involved had been on a training course. Refresher in the last 12 months, yes, and that relates to Steve Loughton. And then on page 8, we find his report, which repeats the CNR technique used, the guiding hold. At approximately 19:08, I was checking the daily food refusals on Eden Wing, just about to check a detainee by the name of, who was currently on a constant supervision and Rule 40, and was residing in room E7, that's cell 7 on wing E. I was told by the officer who was watching him, DCO Fraser, that he had just gone into the toilet area and he couldn't see him properly. I entered the room. I called his name but had no answer. I then went into the toilet area, which is where I saw him curled up around the toilet area with what looked like a ripped t-shirt around his neck, which he was holding on to. I attempted to loose the ligature, but he was holding on to it, so I asked DCO Fraser to pass me his fish knife, and I managed to cut the ligature off. I then pulled 1527 out of the toilet area and asked him to sit on the bed, which he did, and I called for medical assistance on my radio. And then on page 9, there's another signature page, and on page 10, we have a form 213, which is a report of injury to the detainee. We can see it's dated and timed in hand at 1900 hours on the 25th of April. And on page 11, please, which is the last page, seen on E-Wing room, I think it says, by Joe, RGN Joe perhaps. Detainee has placed a ligature around his neck, removed by staff. After that he went to toilet and attempted to self-strangulate something and removed from his neck. Slightly redness noted on his neck, and then there's a body map. And the medical staff name appears to be M. Malcolm. Does that mean anything to you?
No, sir.
No. So that's the use of force form, and I just want to show you one other document, please, for now. The following tab for you, Chair, number 25 for us, please. CJS 000902 at page 8. CJS 000902 at page 8. And what we have here is a use of force review meeting form, and we can see at the top half it's completed by Steve Webb, 17th of July 2017, so getting on for 3 months after the event. And he completes in literally a tick box exercise. Are all of the use of force reports present? Yes. Are the documents completed correctly and to an acceptable standard? Yes. Is the F213 medical form present? Yes. Is there CCTV, body-worn camera, camcorder evidence which covers this incident? Yes. Now this all relates to the incident relating to apparently D1527, although there's no date for the incident. But you see the G4S log number 10517. That's the same number that we saw on the front sheet of the use of force form that we were just looking at. So it appears it's that incident to which it relates. Were you aware of any body-worn camera footage or anything of that nature?
No, sir.
And then under the heading, does the incident meet the following criteria? Reasonable in the circumstances? Yes. No more force than is necessary? Yes. Was it necessary? Yes. Proportionate to the seriousness of the situation? Yes. And then under outcome of this review, further investigation required? No. Letters of commendation? No. Lessons learned and further training? No. No further action required. Were you aware of forms like this?
I wasn't actually, sir, no.
No. And did you know Steve Webb?
As a manager at the centre, yes.
Yeah. Okay. But insofar as it deals with that first part of the use of force, to which you were party, privy, is it a fair summary, even though it's a tick box exercise as far as you're concerned?
I felt that the force used by Steve Loughton on the detainee was necessary, given he was trying to self-harm, and it appeared proportionate. Of course, the language that followed wasn't necessary, but that's not covered by the tick box.
No. No. But it only deals with the first part of the incident.
Of course.
It doesn't deal with, there's no mention of the battery in Mr. Loughton's report.
No, sir.
There's no mention, certainly not, of what happened afterwards.
No, sir.
In Mr. Loughton's report. Coming then finally to just a couple of other bits and bobs, if I may, about follow-ups and other things that were said. If we go, please, Chair, can we put up on screen, please, the following transcript, TRN 0000077 at page 45. Page 45. This is a conversation much later on the 9th of May that you had. And it's a conversation with Jan Pascali and Derek Murphy. And do you see about two-thirds of the way down, Jan Pascali saying, "We don't cringe at breaking bones"?
Yes, sir.
If I killed, I wouldn't be bothered. I'd carry on. A lot of people are freaked out when you, not you, but like proper bit scared. What was he talking about there? Was he talking about this incident or another incident?
I think he was talking about a lot of people like me, as in me, Callum Tully, and that they get kind of freaked out and
let's
thrown off by
yeah. Well, I can help you, because if we look a little further up the page, about halfway. No, all right. Do you see 3 lines up on this expansion? I didn't cry. I was tired, Jan. I was fucking knackered. You didn't see me having to try and pull him out of the toilet. So that seems to be the reference point, the context in which he says that.
Yes, sir.
And so when he said things to you like, I don't cringe at breaking bones, was this Jan being Jan, just pure bravado, or did you think there was something to it?
I thought there was something to it, sir.
And do you remember we looked a little earlier, perhaps I don't have to show you it again, if you need me to, I can, on the 4th of May, when D1527 had been on the netting, and do you remember you said to Clayton Fraser, what do you do about somebody like him? And what did he say?
What Jan did.
What Jan did. And that's the 4th of May. This is the 9th of May that we've got up on screen. Did people admire, do you think, what Jan had done on the 25th of April? Was it something to be respected rather than criticised?
Yes, sir.
And then another transcript, please, and I'm nearly done, but not quite. TRN 000089 at page 19. This is the 6th of June, page 19, please. I'm not going to go through all of it because there's quite a bit to it, but this is Jan Pascali talking to you on that day. It's about his time in prison. And if we can focus on the top half for now, at line 670, we've got him saying, restraining people, having to beat the shit out of them, and really, you do cross the line. You have to do things that don't sit right with you, maybe morally. I remember when I first joined, I was ordered to do it, so I did it all properly. Locked, and a few things are missed, fucking way with me. He went, what are you doing? And I went, I'm restraining you. Cellmate punched me in the side of the head. That's what sparked me, and I was like, fuck this. Half of them in prison, they know how to get out of the locks. And you say at 685, sounds like you got corrupted. Who, me? And you say, by what prison is? He says, fucking in my heyday, me and Tony, mate, the shit we done, but the people we were doing it to were not nice people, like monsters who would scare everybody, me included. We did ourselves before the three of us. We've come off worse a few times as well, but what you going to do? And he says, what if I told you could be sitting in the office now talking with a prisoner, and he decides to tell you how much he enjoys raping babies and shit? And he talks more about, you know, his life in prison and his experience in prison, because Jan Pascali had been a prison officer, is that right?
HP Wandsworth, so yes.
Yeah, at Wandsworth. And then just to complete this part of your evidence with the chair's agreement to rise for the day, just one final transcript, please. TRN 000038. This, I think, is a video diary of yours, Mr. Tully, 596 of Kenkov 3012. So that's on the 25th of April, this diary. If we go to page 5, and if we can expand it, please. Chair, it's B21 for you. Here you say something you already said to us, but you said it on the day, as well as saying it later in the course of making your statement to the police. It's really just after halfway down, and at that point I became so concerned for the detainee's safety, I actually thought Jan was going to kill him. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
So you said it on the same day to the BBC that was in your mind.
Yes, sir.
And you repeated it to the police in November 27. And at page 7, you say, and then I went to the toilet, which we saw, started crying, sorted out my microphone. And then I witnessed that, and left, went straight back to the wing, sat in the office with Jan, and you can't see him say it, but you can hear him saying that what he was trying to do to the detainee, and then later on, soon after, I was back on constant supervision that I was originally on after all of that, and Jan was again saying to me what he did to how he felt about the detainee and what he had previously done in his former job at Wandsworth Prison. And if we go to the top of page 8, please. He said, right at the top, he said at Wandsworth they used to do things like smash detainees' faces onto sinks, cut them with razor blades so they could say they had self-harmed, and so much stuff that was said that I can't even gather it all up in my mind. I just feel so overwhelmed by the whole thing. And again, Mr. Tully, was this just Pascali, as it were, being the alpha male at Brook House, or was this something people believed or were prepared to believe?
I certainly believed him, sir.
No. So you didn't think this was just bragging? This was Jan Pascali?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And his behaviour on the day suggested he was capable of such actions.
Well, that's the end of the 25th of April incident, which I wish to ask you about. We may have to play the unpixelated version, but not necessarily with you. But we'll ask you back for tomorrow, please, and hopefully we'll complete your evidence at a reasonable time tomorrow. Chair, with your permission, 10 o'clock, please.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Tully, just to say, I know it's been a long and not particularly easy day, so thank you. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.